Yes, sir. Live started.
We'll start at sharp 3:30.
How are you, Sudarshan ji?
Hi,
Hello, how are you?
Sudarshan.
Yeah, so good.
Hi, Sudarshan.
Hello, how are you? Thanks, Glenn. Thank you very much for joining. Thanks a million.
Hi,
My
Sudarshan.
pleasure.
And Glenn, just to inform you, Professor Tarun Jain has won twice the DG Shah Award, which we instituted.
Oh, wow.
And so
That's
he's one of
great.
the most distinguished faculty in terms of research at IIM Ahmedabad. In fact, Tarun, we instituted award during Glenn's time when he was the president.
When I was a president, actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you approved it, and then he was the first and second nominee for that selection. Hey, thanks so much, Glenn. Thanks.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Glenn, Ulas and me go back for 45 years at IIM Ahmedabad, same
Wow.
batch, and we take two courses at IIM Ahmedabad together. One on
Health tech.
med tech management, health tech management, and second on management of customer value delivery. So Ulas, me, and two professors, we take the course together. So
That's amazing. Yeah.
so Ulas is a very dear friend over the years. Yeah. And we have got this SIG, which consists of around 400 alumni in different sectors of healthcare. So both of us have annual conference. Last time, Dilip Bhai, Pankaj Bhai, and Samir Bhai were there, and Nadda was enjoying the class he was doing it. And glad he spent the whole day at IIM Ahmedabad. So
Wow.
that was one of the great things. Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole day he was there, and Ulas played a very important. So I will.
A minute to go. 1 minute.
I will put myself.
No, hello. Sudarshan.
Please, you are the boss.
Thank you very much be here. In fact, that should be. Professor Tarun, it's 3:30.
Yes, we should start.
We should start. So good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the IIM Ahmedabad Healthcare Alumni Special Interest Group, a warm welcome to all of you today for this online fireside chat facilitated by the IIMA Alumni and External Relations Department. For discussing a topic of immense current global relevance, which is leading with innovation, how Glenmark plans to redefine global pharma, we are honored to have with us Mr. Glenn Saldanha, Chairman and Managing Director, Glenmark Pharmaceuticals, and Professor Tarun Jain of IIM Ahmedabad. Welcome to you, sir. Let me first introduce our speaker, Mr. Glenn Saldanha. Mr. Glenn Saldanha is the Chairman and Managing Director of Glenmark Pharmaceuticals, a $1.6 billion company with growing presence across more than 80 countries. A visionary leader, he has been instrumental in transforming Glenmark into a diversified, innovation-led pharmaceutical company recognized on the global stage. Under his leadership, Glenmark has built strong capabilities in R&D, biologics, and specialty therapies, becoming one of the few Indian pharma companies with novel molecules in global clinical development. Through the company's biotech arm, Ichnos Glenmark Innovation, IGI, he has enabled breakthrough research in oncology and immunology to reach patients worldwide, shaping India's position on the global pharmaceutical innovations map. Honored with the EY Entrepreneur of the Year award in 2017, Mr. Saldanha is widely regarded as a thought leader in the pharmaceutical sector. He continues to champion accessible innovation, advanced manufacturing, and strategic global partnerships to deliver lasting value for patients and healthcare systems. A pharmacy graduate from Mumbai University and an MBA from New York's Stern School of Business, he brings a unique blend of scientific acumen and strategic foresight, strengthened by his early experience at Eli Lilly and PwC in the US. Welcome to you, sir, and I hope to learn a lot from this session as well as the other audience, members of the audience feel the same way. And to moderate today's discussion, we have with us Professor Tarun Jain. Professor Tarun Jain is Professor of Economics at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, where he holds the Reserve Bank of India Chair in Finance and Economics. He is the past chair of CMHS, which is IMA's Center for Management of Health Services at the Institute. He currently serves on the Digital Committee of the NABH. Professor Jain teaches health economics at IIMA, conducts data-driven research, and writes case studies on the sector. He also chairs several executive programs for both government sector and leading private sector organizations. Welcome, Professor. With this brief introduction, I'm pleased to hand over the session to you, sir. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you so much, Ulasji. I also want to welcome Glenn to this conversation. I'm his healthcare alumni, very accomplished, they're very active, and I think they're very keen to hear from you today. Glenmark Pharmaceuticals is a leader in Indian healthcare sector. The firm really stands out as an innovation-driven company. About 60% of the revenues come from branded products today, especially in dermatology, in respiratory and oncology. The big internal news, as I understand it, is Glenmark 3.0, which is a plan to move to increasing that innovation part of the portfolio that is driving the company. So in that context, I think several of us are waiting to hear from Glenn on what's happening within the firm, within the market, and what's happening globally, and the plans ahead. Glenn does not do a lot of media. I looked around, he doesn't do a lot of media. So in that sense, to get him here and participate in this conversation is particularly valuable. So my role today is really to nudge the conversation along. And I really hope that Glenn will do almost all the talking today. Right? So.
Thank you, Tarun. Thank you for having me. It's truly an honor to be here and address, the entire IIMA alumni forum, right? And talk about the Glenmark journey. So, I've been running Glenmark 25 years now. I moved back from the US in 98, was appointed CEO in 2000. And, when I moved back, one of the things we did was we IPO'd the company in 2000. I still remember we raised $10 million way back at a $40 million market cap, right? And we took that 10 million and we put it into innovation, building our facility for innovative research back in 2000, which is here in Navi Mumbai, right? And we started with small molecule research. So, our strategy at Glenmark was always to, over this last 25 years, has always been how can we scale the company. On one hand, leverage India in terms of low cost of manufacturing and be the pharmacy of the world, right? And we've done that very successfully, not just Glenmark, but the entire industry, to scale, the generic side of the business, scale the branded side of the business, both in India as well as worldwide. And on the other hand, Glenmark, given my background and given my experience in the US, I always had the aspiration of being in the innovation space and moving up the value chain in innovation. Of course, innovation, it's been 25 years. We've had a lot of success and of course a lot of failures too, right? It's a pretty difficult journey, right, through the last 25 years. But I think at every stage we kept learning, kept reinventing ourselves, kept looking for different avenues of how to succeed. And I think the recent deal we did with AbbVie clearly was transformational, right? Puts us on the world map to have a drug which is in multiple myeloma, which is probably could be best in class, which we've partnered with AbbVie. So, that's been the journey. We worked on several licensing deals, over 10 deals, got $300 million of cash initially, Now with AbbVie, we got another 700, so we have about $1 billion of cash through innovation, right, through licensing and partnerships. And now we've got all the learnings behind us, right, which we are hoping to utilize to keep moving up the value chain, keep coming up with more molecules, both in the early stages of research and then doing a lot of partnering as we go forward. So our journey ahead is more innovative led. Glenmark 3.0 is how can we move up the value chain into being more innovative driven and trying to move up the value chain. So that's a quick nutshell, Tarun, for you to just summarize the Glenmark journey, right, over the last 25 years for me.
No, thanks so much, Glenn. This is a nice segue, and what it's emphasizing is that the Glenmark DNA has now become that we are going to do innovation, right? I mean, that is now the, I think, key point. Of course, innovation is tough. There's a reason why it's rare to have Indian firms do it. And so, in some ways, I want to just understand a little bit more about the ecosystem in which you are operating and which Indian pharma is operating. One of the points that I always noticed, and I lived in the US as well in the academic sector, is that the model, especially of industry and academia collaborating very closely together. And that perhaps is still an evolving, emerging kind of a collaboration here in India. Oftentimes in the US, what you'd have is a bright assistant professor who does a lot of science along with postdocs and staff. And when that science gets converted into something closer to a product, that lab is taken over by a pharma company to do the next stage of products, right? And to me, that's an interesting model because what it says is that people are motivated to join academia because they know that if they succeed, there's a big payout at the end of it. But it's also saying that the firms also view academia as a place where a lot of bright ideas are coming from, and that test bed for many wonderful things. So I'm just trying to understand your vision for academia and industry collaboration. I mean, we all want more innovation. How do we get this engine started?
Sure. I think the first thing, Tarun, is innovation is global. It's not about any geography, right? It's independent of any geography. And if you see the innovation journey, right, I mean, clearly the Americans were way ahead of everybody else, right? And now with, of course, China making a lot of headway, right? It's truly showing you that innovation can come from anywhere, right? And from any country, any system, any geography. So, and if you really want to be part of innovation, you have to think globally, right? In terms of where the best talent exists, where the best pools of research are going on worldwide, and where can you tap on some of that, right? Independent of geography. So that's been my experience, right? But coming back to your question specifically on academia, see the American system, right? Academia is way ahead, right? They've always built that and nurtured that particular area, right? Where you have a number of academic institutions coming up with a number of incubators, then selling them to pharma companies, licensing to pharma companies. But if you look at the Chinese model, right, that's not, I don't think academia is playing that big a role in China. Or there are different models that one can adapt, right, to be innovative. And I think, for example, even in India, right, I think, I'm sure there's a lot of push from the government to get academic institutions more involved. Yeah. But again, you have to weave your way through, navigate, right, through the maze, right, globally to be able to figure out where you can actually get the best talent and get the best knowledge, right, to get innovation going.
Yeah. So in some ways, what you're suggesting is that there's no reason to think of Indian academia specifically. If Indian pharmaceutical companies can sort of scout for talent all over the world, and maybe that's also true for biotech startups. The US system is very heavy on biotech startups, whereas in India, even though we've had great success in the startup space in general, particularly IT space. The biotech world is still a little bit on the thinner side. So just want, to get your perspective on that. And I know that, there will be IMA alumni who are running VC firms, PE firms. And if you had any advice for, those community, because they tend to interact much more with the startup space. So would love to get your thoughts on that, biotech space.
I think the biotech world is amazing, right? I mean, most of the biotechs, it started with the US, and there's a lot of capital which gets raised at every stage, right? And you have the XBI index and various things around biotechs, right, in the US. Lots of successful biotechs, either they get taken out by big pharma at some point, or some of them go to commercialization. So there are lots of examples, companies like Regeneron, companies like Vertex, they've been very successful in scaling, right? From a small biotech to now a major pharmaceutical company, right? That space is very interesting. I think the whole concept is the way the biotechs typically operate is, they're all in. They go all into one particular asset or one particular thought, right? And if that succeeds, they hit the home run, right? Uh, if they fail, they're done, right?
Yeah.
And not many of them succeed. So typically, most of the VCs, they take multiple bets to get one success, right? To one payday or one for a typical VC. So they do it. But I think all in all, what that does is it gives individuals great opportunities, especially people who are very well qualified, who have great ideas, right, to pursue those ideas and go out and capital raise and to use that capital effectively to scale to pursue their thoughts or their dreams, right? To pursue the big dream. So that environment is very live and very exciting. And there are several companies, even Indian companies, who've looked at biotechs, who've acquired biotechs, in the US and in multiple places, right, to scale some of their innovative aspirations. So that's a great space to be in.
So, the biotech suggests to me, the startup space suggests to me is that what startups do particularly well is to match the risk reward ratios. Essentially, scientific discovery, innovation is a risky business, and the rewards are going to, but in order to invest in that risk, you need to have a large payout at the end of it. And the startup space is the place where that happens. So would that have implications for, say, innovation within for big pharmaceutical companies such as yours? Does that have an implication for what should be done internally versus spin outs, or what should be done externally and then acquired?
I think so. The biotech space, the other thing about the biotechs, right, is basically their compensation structures are such, right, that the reward is only when they have a payday, right? Their base comps are low, so they're very driven by that delta, right? So most people who work in that environment, they are working there to make that big payday, right?
Exactly.
And that's a very exciting space, right? And the risk reward, people are ready to risk a lot, right, in terms of comps and stuff like that to pursue that dream, right? Big pharma, on the other hand, I mean, companies like us, right? So what we did is we spun out IGI, right? Iconos Glenmark Innovation, with a clear idea that we wanted to keep that biotech environment going, right? And so we spun that out. It's 100% owned by Glenmark, but at the same time, the management team's motivations, incentives, their aspirations are all of a biotech, right? And the goal for us is eventually to do a listing of that company in the US. So, people are super motivated by what they have accomplished. And 2001 is a classic example. We have a great platform that we've built in IGI. It's an antibody platform technology, right, that can actually host multiple assets there, right, coming out of the technology. So 2001 is the first. So, we've been able to create that environment, which is a typical biotech environment, small teams of people, 100, 200 people actually delivering on that aspiration, and very focused, right? So if it fails, it's done, right?
Yeah.
But if it succeeds, you make it big, right? So, and I think many big pharma companies now realize the value that some of these biotechs bring, right? So
Yeah.
every day if you read pharma news, right? Virtually every day, there's a biotech which gets taken out, right, by big pharma. Yesterday, Pfizer did a deal with a company for a GLP-1, right,
Yeah.
for weight loss.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
So they paid 4.9 billion, right, for a early stage asset. So a lot of the biotech space, right, is very it's a very exciting space if you're in the right area, the right work, and you're doing the right science. There are lots of guys who've got rich, running biotech companies.
Right. So, just a related point, do you feel that India pharmaceutical industry is today ready to pay sort of top dollar or top rupee for scientific as well as managerial talent?
I think so. The way I look at India, right? I mean, there are a handful of companies who have the aspirations of being innovative, right? Innovative led. And those companies are very far, they're pretty large, they're pretty far advanced, right?
Yeah.
And they are happy to pay those kind of comps or salaries or structures to find the best people, right? And then in India, there are a lot of other companies who don't have those aspirations, right? Who want to be generically driven or doing CDMO business, which is fine, right? It's a different business model altogether. But the handful of Indian companies that want to do something transformational, want to get into innovation and try and achieve something transformational are ready to place those bets,
Okay.
which is a great thing, right? And of course, deals like the one we just cut with AbbVie, right, where we got $700 million upfront, right, which is probably the largest payment by world standards. It's among the top 3 deals in the last few years, right?
Right.
And you get $700 million upfront. So hopefully that will provide an incentive for more and more companies to look at the innovation space, right, and get deeper into that, right, to fuel the whole India innovation story going forward.
So, I just want to turn a little bit to policy matters, and since we are on this question of what fuels the India innovation story, if you had to talk to the government of India and the regulators, like what are your top 3, 4 things that you wish what's in your heart today? I wish government of India did this, and maybe it will benefit your firm. Maybe it will spark 20 other Glenmark Pharmaceuticals, right?
Sure.
Lots of competition for you, but that might be fine.
That's perfect.
So, from a policy perspective, I just wonder a lot about what are the drivers of policy, what could facilitate much more, either on the talent side, on the capital side, or the regulatory side. What is it that might be useful to you?
I think so. The Indian government now is doing a lot of things for innovation, right? They have the PRIP scheme that they just launched. They have another large scheme that they're launching, which is the whole research link scheme, right? Which is almost 1 lakh crores they want to deploy into various sectors, right, including pharma. So I think from a capital perspective, the government is doing its bit now, right, or is working on doing its bit, right, in terms of capital deployment into whether it's startups, whether it is providing seed capital, whether it is giving large companies some capital to pursue innovation. So that's a great start, right, and that's a great situation. The other critical element that I've seen, right, why many of the other countries are so successful. Take China, for example, right? In a very short time, in 20, 25 years, many of those companies have transformed themselves, right, from being generic companies to being innovative-led companies. And part of the reason for that is the government itself has reimbursement of expensive medicines, right? So all the innovative medicines to provide better healthcare and better healthcare for their patients, right? Especially the patients who need it, right? They have this reimbursement program. So, and as part of the reimbursement program, automatically, those patients have access to the most sophisticated medicines, right? Either coming from big pharma or from their own companies. And that's how they've been able to very successfully make that transition. So reimbursement of expensive medicines, India doesn't have that model, right? For India, we're still today, it's all out of pocket and patients have to figure out how they're going to pay for medicines, right? And some of these medicines are super expensive, right? So as a result, a reimbursement model will be very helpful to propel, further innovation in India, because then you've got a truly captive model, right, where the government is actually reimbursing expensive medicines. That gives a great impetus to the industry to actually first look for drugs in India and then scale to the rest of the world. Very similar to what China has done. So,
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, this is a story which is across Indian industry, that we wish we had more domestic demand, and that becomes the basis on which so much more we can,
exactly.
our sandbox becomes much bigger, and therefore we can try out much more innovation, many more products, and some of those products will fail. Like in TK, I mean, you made enough money on the ones that were successful to cover that, and right now what we see is that sometimes you try many things and then you just don't have enough demand for it. But yeah, I interrupted you, but so go ahead.
No, and I think, from a talent perspective, India has always had some of the sharpest minds worldwide, right? And there are lots of people of Indian origin, given what's happening in the Western world, right, who will be longing to come back to India, right, if provided the right opportunity and the right platform.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, we're very well positioned, right, to get people back from the US or who've been educated there, or some people even from who currently are in India, right, who are aspiring to learn more about innovation. So that can easily be created, right? The two challenges are capital, which now the government is addressing, and the second is the captive market, right? The reimbursement of expensive medicines, right? Because then that changes the whole landscape for companies to succeed in India.
That's true. And in some ways, demand and supply are the two classic, economic drivers, and then you get
Absolutely.
it. So, almost like 2 or 3 times now we've mentioned this Chinese innovation. And somewhat the context is that if you looked at Chinese pharma companies 20, 25 years back, I mean, they were nuts. And like, I hate to say it in these terms. I mean, not players in a global sense or a significant sense. And now what you've seen is a massive rise of, suddenly what Chinese do to many, many sectors, they're now doing to pharmaceuticals. And India, we've always prided ourselves for being the pharmacy of the world. We're aspiring to be the laboratory of the world. But it's almost like China is, we're aspiring, they're doing. So, again, this is something which most probably you're on the bleeding edge of. So, love to get your thoughts on what's so special about the Chinese model. I mean, we can all say that, yes, we all wish that our government also provided us lots of demand. But what else is happening in China? And maybe it's not just about replicating, but what else we can be doing from an Indian ecosystem perspective, to say that, look, there's much more to be done here, either from the lab side or the manufacturing side. People are interested in quality, people are interested in things like that. So I've already seen a question on evaluating investments in companies which build early assets for collaboration with universities. So, just again, because you've mentioned China a few times, I want to open the floor to you sharing your thoughts on that.
So if you look at China, as you rightly said, 25 years they were nowhere, right, in the space. And what they did was they leapfrogged the generic industry completely, right? India dominated that space, and rightly so, we're now the pharmacy of the world. But they actually focused a lot of their energies on the innovation aspects, right? And coming up with competing with the US for discovery and development of transformational products, right? And they've been extremely successful in doing that, right, over the last 25 years. I mean, some of the Chinese companies, you'll be shocked. I mean, they spend almost 29-30% of their revenues on innovation research, right? Compared to that, the Indian companies, all our R&D investments, max, we are spending about 7-8% of revenues, right? So that's the gap in terms of investment on innovation, right? So the Chinese companies have put in a lot of capital. Of course, one is, they have the government backing because of this whole reimbursement scheme, so they know there is a captive market. What they typically do, they're very quick in terms of running clinical trials, getting the products to their home markets, right? So they launch in the Chinese market. And from there, they take it all over the world, right? Or they find partners to partner with them at various stages of development. And that's how they've built their whole ecosystem. So yeah, I mean, it's been they've been pretty smart about how they've built their innovation capabilities, right? As a country, right? And I'm sure if we adopt some of those learnings, right, we can move up pretty quickly to becoming a powerhouse in innovation. I mean, especially on the clinical end, we have tremendous capabilities. We are a large population, just like China. So, patient recruitment becomes much quicker. So that's a great platform, right, to move forward with, right? I think the R&D spends, of course, our capital markets are not that forgiving, right? Where they allow you to spend that kind of capital, right? Most of the Chinese companies have Hong Kong listings, and they're able to get valued for the innovation work that they're doing. Whereas India, we're still not at a point where we are actually rewarding companies for doing innovation. So I'm hoping that will change over time. We have a few more successes, and then automatically people will probably look at Indian pharma companies quite differently in terms of our ability to innovate consistently, right? And that's a key element. So that evolution will take some time, but I'm sure we'll get there.
This sounds wonderful. So, I already see a couple of questions which are basically around this. So clearly there's a lot of interest in knowing much more about what is it that the journey of both Glenmark's innovation, I think, bets. I mean, it's a 25-year bet, so it's not, but it remains a bet. I mean, with the nature of innovation is always that, you don't know what you'll wake up to tomorrow and what is happening to that business. So, but anyway, I see, I'm looking at the attendee list and some of the stalwarts of our special interest group, many of the leaders from the IMA healthcare community have logged in and would love to get some of the questions from. So if there are audience members who want to ask questions, I think this is a good opportunity to do that. And if you want to particularly unmute yourself, I will press the button so that you can speak up and then ask the question. So, while people are still thinking and typing, I do want to get some feedback or reactions on what has been happening this week. In some ways, it's been a active week for U.S. trade policy and U.S. Workforce policy. So the Indian pharmaceutical industry has been, has always seen the U.S. as a major market. And of course, Indian talent has in the healthcare sector flown to the US quite extensively. So, insofar that those are active areas in the news, do you have any reactions or thoughts, both on the impact, but also how to take advantage of this? Policy shifts always create winners and losers, and how do we make sure that we are amongst the winners of a policy shift?
Well, I think on the workforce side, right, I don't think there is any major impact for our industry, right?
Yeah.
So the Indian pharma industry is pretty well insulated from that, right? Because the bulk of the talent is a lot of the work gets done locally, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, on the tariffs, there's still a lot of uncertainty on the tariffs, particularly on the generic side, so far it's been great. There's no move there. But on the innovation side, there is a lot of uncertainty. But again, I think all that will sort itself out over time at the end of the day.
So in some ways, the only difficulty is that you don't know what next week will bring. Anyway, Shailesh Iyengar, I've unmuted him. So Shailesh, do you want to
Thank
ask?
you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Hi.
Prof. Jain and Glenn. Great to
Hi,
be listening
Sailesh.
to you. And, for the rest of the audience, I know Glenn from the early 2000s when he started the journey. And simply outstanding work. Congratulations, Glenn. Super
Thank you,
proud
Sailesh.
of what you
Thank
and
you.
your team has been able to achieve. Very quickly, Glenn, responding to Professor Jain's questions on what could be done in our country, to create another Glenmark or, the kind of ecosystem he was talking about. And I was reflecting on what happened in China during my early days when I was in OPPI. And one of the things they told us was that in China, there is no two associations. It's the Indian company. I mean, the Chinese companies and the multinationals have one association, and basically they are interested in what is good for China, and that has led to some amount of consistency of messaging, which was required to be given to the government, and that's how they came up with certain policy interventions which helped the Chinese companies to go towards the innovation ecosystem. For example, one of the things they did was this so-called data protection that they gave to Chinese companies when they innovated and made sure that it was not copied by another Chinese company. So it was required because otherwise innovation, with all this hard work that companies like Glenmark do, it can get into a little bit of difficult situation. And similarly, biotech processes were simplified. Multinationals were given, as you rightly said, an ecosystem to promote their innovative products and they got reimbursement. So they were happy. So they did not come in the way. And that's how the whole system appeared. During my time, I tried, and you were also president of IPA. And I think it is something that we need to think through as an industry, that old days are gone. And today, in the new world, probably there is a need for rethinking how we should come together as a industry to do what is right for India, and not just get stuck up with our philosophy of our parent companies, especially in MNCs. So this is just a thought. I know it's a bit vague, but I thought it was necessary now to think of creating that ecosystem in our country.
Totally agree, Sailesh.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Great. So, we have Dr. Dinesh Dua. Dr. Dua, I've put you on.
Yeah, thanks very much. Can you hear me, Tarun?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much for getting me in here. Hi, Glenn.
Hi,
I've known you
Dinesh.
since my VOCAR days and Econ
Yeah,
days. We've shared the stage together in various fora.
absolutely.
Based on my experience on NCEs and NBEs, both in VOCAR as well as in Econ US, my experience has been that the entire innovation space in the US, particularly on the NBE side, has been leveraged from the institutions, academic institutions, right? I, as CII chairman also of Northern India, tried my very best to leverage Indian institutions into the bandwagon, but failed miserably, I must admit that for sure. Eli Lilly, for example, they got their recombinant insulin for 50,000 US dollars. And today we're talking about something like $25 billion, including the entire gamut of insulins. Now, what is it that can be done in our country to leverage the academic institutions like the West has done? China, for example, I've extensively traveled and studied the Chinese model. There again, the biologics have prospered, one, because of Chinese scientists coming back from the US to be back in China because a red carpet was laid out for them. And an ecosystem was created which stimulated research. And there again, particularly in Shanghai and in Beijing, institutions were involved in innovation. And that's why China rose from nowhere 25 years ago to where they are today. So, what is it, Glenn, that can be done to stimulate Indian institutions to get into innovation space?
I think, Dinesh, there's a lot of there's a lot of catch up, right? That some of the institutions need to do, right, to work to be at par with some of the global peers, right? Um, Again, the US is the work coming out of academia in the US is very sophisticated and has evolved to a significant extent, right? I'm sure India will get there, and I know the government is actively working on seeing what else can be done, right, to further stimulate academia, right, to drive, provide a lot of incentives, impetus to scientists who are working in government labs, right, to come up with novel innovation and even possible partnering some of those innovations, right, with pharmaceutical companies. So there is a lot of effort right now on, but we'll need some time, right, to catch up with the rest.
There's a comment by Swami Subramaniam in the chat box that China has a program to attract and host returning academics.
Correct.
And so, of course, Chinese academics come back and they're not necessarily only working in public institutions, but oftentimes in private universities
Yeah.
where the compensation structures are significantly better than government-run organizations. And the other point that they're saying is that the Chinese execution on publications and patents has been much better than what has been the case in India. And
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, though. I mean, and it's not just in academia. I mean, the Chinese were very successful in bringing back even talent who are working for private organizations, right, to come in and set up biotechs in China, right? And that worked really well. A lot of the leaders, a lot of the leading biotech companies in China, they're all many of them are US educated, US returned individuals who've come back and set up that because of the incentives that were provided to them, right, to come in and set it up. So you're right. I mean, China has done a lot in this direction.
so, I've asked Rakesh also has a point about IP protection. And rather than me reading it out, Rakesh, do you want to just discuss that point in a little bit detail?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. This is Rakesh Bhargav.
Hi,
I
Rakesh.
am past chairman of Fresenius Kabi Oncology. And after having retired from there, my interest is actually into mentoring startups. And one very interesting startup came to me and they want to do research in pharmaceuticals and synthesis. And this is where, I'm helping them out, and we came up against this issue that as they go along, they will have some IP, but where is the budget coming from to protect the IP? Because there are many IPs around the same process or the same molecules. Everything has to be, protected with a patent. And if you file so many patents in the US, then you have to defend them year after year after year. And a poor startup doesn't have the budget. So I think this is a space where government could step in and help them out. So what would be your recommendation, sir, to the government of India on this aspect?
I think now, Rakesh, if you see the PRIP scheme, for example, right, or there are some other research incentives, right? So there is a lot of, especially there's a lot of initiatives which are now being tailored, right, for small startups to protect their IP, to file patents. So a lot of seed capital is being put into some of these startups by the government. It'll still take some time, but it's there, it's in the works, right, to develop that.
Yeah, so the typical cost of defending a patent, as you would know, runs into something like 50, 60,000 US dollars a year.
Yeah.
And I don't think government help is there to that extent. So I would think that the government should have a kind of a corpus or a big pool to help this out. I don't know how you feel about it.
Again, all I can say, Rakesh, is I know there are several such schemes which are currently underway, right? I don't want to preempt it, but when some of these schemes get rolled out, right, hopefully that should address this.
Okay,
Yeah, I
thank
think
you.
the best way to think about it is that IP protection is a common problem across many firms in the industry. So if there is ever a good role for government funds or common pools, it is to solve problems which are common across many firms in the market. So no one firm would ever be have the resources to do solo defense of IP patents, but common defense might be a useful use of government resources, right? So I think
Yeah,
that's the best way I can think of it. But happy to hear your thoughts as well.
yeah, thank
So
you. Thank you, Professor.
there is Upendra. He's asking about technology bottlenecks for pharma companies, and Alan D'Souza has a very interesting question, which I think of it as a related question, which is that Glenmark had he describes them as very humble beginnings. Alan, maybe not so humble, but still, early stage. And in the early stages, innovation is not as important, and then you become an innovation driven company. So I'm clubbing these two questions or comments together and trying to get your reactions on how do you go from both organizational culture, investments, all those things, even managers, top management's perspective that this is innovation is important to invest in. How do you make that
I,
work?
I think that's a very good question. So, when you think about it, given the circumstances in India, right, where there was very little support from a financial perspective, right, for innovation, one really had to figure out how can you build a revenue stream, right, to support your ambitions, right? So I think, initially a lot of our time went in trying to build an enterprise, right? Which could actually generate profits and cash and all that, right? To eventually pursue our dreams of being innovative led. And that's how we evolved and got to this point, right? Of course, from here on, given the scale that we are at, right? I mean, you have two paths, right? Either you further scale your generics business and grow bigger and bigger in that area, or you make the transformation to being innovative led, right? And we picked the latter, right? And there's no right answer, right? You could do either, and you could still be successful, right? The reality is, we picked the latter, and as a company, we've always had innovation as our backbone, right? All through this journey while we were scaling the core business, right? And making sure we generated revenues and profits and all that, right? So we always had innovation as our backbone. We did deals as early as 2004 with Forest, then with Teijin, then with Lilly, then with Merck, with Sanofi in 2011 or 12, another one in 2013. So we've done licensing deals all throughout, right? To basically try and make sure that the capital was available to keep innovation going, right? And to keep those learnings going. So we figured it out. We tried to create a model all throughout, right? Which could fund our ambitions, right, of being innovative led. And there were times when we had a 10-year period where we really struggled, right? From 2013 to maybe 2019, less than 10 years. When we spun out IGI, we thought we'll raise capital in IGI. We couldn't raise capital in the US. And then, of course, we kept going, and until we got a 2001. So I think, you have to navigate through a lot of challenges along the way if you really want to pursue the dream of being innovative led, right? Of course, today there's a lot more capital, there's a lot more government involvement. So hopefully, there'll be more capital to pursue innovation. So it won't take the next set of companies as long as it took us, right? But that journey is one has to really go through that journey.
Yeah. So, Manish is asking you to just share failures.
Failures.
It's a very important question. I mean,
So
what, essentially, where is it that you struggled? And maybe redemption story, maybe you're still struggling. I don't know.
I mean, Tarun, it's been a struggle all throughout, right? So, for example, I'll give you certain landmarks in my journey, right? So 2008, we had 3 or 4 molecules which were partnered out in 1 year during the global crisis. All of them came back, right? And that was the end of 3 deals we had done. We had challenges of capital, funding capital. We leveraged we took on leverage to fund our innovation because we believed in what we did. Obviously, that didn't work out that well, during certain periods of time. Um, so we did a lot of different things to keep innovation going. There's been lots of failure, right, to get to a success, right? It doesn't come without failure, right? I think at every stage you fail, but if you're truly committed and you're learning from those failures, you're able to improvise on that, then automatically you will come out successful at the end, right? I strongly believe that, and that's been the 25-year journey for us. So failure at every step of the way, but you can't lose heart about what you're trying to achieve.
Don't lose heart. There's one guy, Priyanshu. He was in my class. Priyanshu, I do remember you. He now works at Glenmark.
Oh, okay. Straight.
And he's asking, like, what are the key skills and mindsets should future leaders have? And, if one answer is don't lose heart. They don't get into tough businesses if you don't have the heart to last.
Absolutely.
But Glenn, clearly that question is for you. So why don't you add?
No, I totally agree with what you just said, Tarun. I mean, look, innovation is not for the faint-hearted, okay? You have to really have a long horizon and you have to be super committed, right? To be able to be innovative led, right? And as you rightly said, you have to it's a journey, right? So you're taking employees along. There are some employees who don't believe because they see so much of hardship, so much of capital being put into something which one doesn't know if anything's going to come out at the end.
Yeah.
It's all risk capital at the end of the day. Investors are never happy with seeing, 4-5% of revenues going into innovation where they don't know if anything's going to come out of it,
Not
right?
very transparent. Yeah.
So it's an extremely difficult journey, right? And for you to be part of it it takes a lot of guts and takes a lot of conviction, right? For you to actually be part of it and to be able to transform the firm using that.
Okay.
As I said, the rewards, I mean, the AbbVie deal is a testimony for the rewards, right? $700 million upfront is more than what most people would ever make in a generics business, right? On a sustained basis. So it's a significant reward there.
That's true. And you've been successful in creating those deals. I think the tough part tends to be when those deals don't happen. And then, the wait for the deal is the really, really tough part, and you're just waiting.
You have to sustain.
Yeah.
You have to sustain and keep reinventing yourself at every stage.
Yeah.
Keep learning and reinventing yourself, looking for different avenues where you think you can be transformational, right? And areas where you think you can innovate.
Right. So let me take a couple of questions. So Jitendra has a question about Jan Aushadhi policies that the government has, which is a very interesting distribution model for pharmaceuticals, particularly for low-income segment of Indians. There was a question on homeopathy and other kinds of alternate drug systems, and if there's space for those kinds of therapies within Indian pharmaceutical industry. So these are some of the more policy-oriented questions, as well as regulatory infrastructure in India. So, any thoughts on those?
So I think Jan Aushadhi is a low-cost model, right? It's primarily generic medicines, and that's a great initiative for the low-cost generics. As regards the regulatory framework, I mean, there's a significant shift now, and the regulators in India are pretty sophisticated, and they're constantly upgrading their skill sets, right? So it's from a regulatory perspective, I think there's a lot of change which has happened over the last 4-5 years, and thanks to the current DCGI who's made a lot of changes in that direction. So that's a huge positive. But yeah, I think the whole idea is, how do you come up with stuff to leverage all these trends which are there.
Yeah. So, there are lots of questions about Ayurvedic therapies, homeopathy. Let me just leave these at the moment for the question. If those of you who can see the chat box, there are quite a few interesting questions on basically more innovation. And I think right now what has happened is that you've been recognized as someone who has done this very successfully. And I think it's an inspiration to many people. There's your secret sauce within your firm, and how are you going to take this to more companies? Either other big pharmaceutical players want to copy what you're doing. Maybe they're going to be VCs and PE folks who are going to say that let's take some of the lessons and be a little bit more patient or more diversified into the more innovation biotech space. For example, there's this point from Rashmi, which is about, she's from the Research and Innovation Circle of Hyderabad, and that's a government organization. I know that well, headed by Ajit Rangnekar, the former ISPT. So, I think there are lots. So, we are still at that place in India where the small independent organization, whether you call it the academic lab or you call it the biotech startup, it still is a little bit of a journey for creating that ecosystem where there are lots and lots of them, and then we can be more confident that those that innovation can happen. So it's a little bit of a journey, but I think what's happening is that at least on this discussion, many people are looking at you for those answers, right? Any final thoughts, Glenn, that you'd like to share?
I think the key is, just one has to stay on the course, right? And figure out how to stay on the course, right?
Mm.
Both from a capital perspective, from a science perspective, from a research perspective, what can make you globally competitive, right? And what can make you, uh, play at the global stage in innovation, right? The minute you start thinking at a global level, right? It's only a matter of time before you're successful, right? Of course, there are going to be highs, lows, ups and downs. That's part of the journey, but you just have to wither that and keep going, right? And keep figuring out ways to reinvent yourself, right? To keep going on that journey.
Mm. So I think those are very I think sage words, and we're looking all forward to the 3.0 of Glenmark Pharmaceuticals. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think all of us in this call, all of us, I really appreciate your thoughts, candid thoughts, very much. And Ulasji, would you like to come in and say a few words?
I think Ullas is on mute.
You're mute.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, good.
Thank you very much, Glenn and Tarun.
Thank
I think what you have done is you have given us some wonderful learning in just about an hour about Glenmark's success in going the innovation route, which is a very big thing to talk about in the Indian context. So I also wish to thank a number of our participants who had many questions. Unfortunately, we couldn't take all the questions, but definitely these questions could be addressed as we go along and have more such webinars, and we'll look forward to following Glenmark's progress in this area. And we wish that we have more such occasions when we could have interaction with the industry and the academia so that a lot of learning can take place for all of us. Thank you very much. Thank you everybody who helped in organizing this webinar for everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Ullas.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you so much, Glenn.
Thanks,
Really
Tarun.
appreciate all these insights, and
Absolutely.
look forward to hearing more about them in the future.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's stay in touch. Yeah. Thanks, Tarun.
Absolutely.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Ullas.
Thank you. Bye.
You want to stop recording?
Okay, sir. I'm ending the session.
Yeah.
Okay.